Nancy, thank you so much. 7:04 as you head out the door. All eyes will be on Charleston this morning as U.S. Senator Tim Scott is expected to officially unveil his presidential plans.
So until Friday, the South Carolina Republican simply said he had a major announcement. But a filing made his intentions very clear. Fox Carolina's Myra Ruiz, she's live in North Charleston right now covering this all for you. Myra?
Well, good morning. We are at the Buccaneer Fieldhouse on the campus of Charleston Southern University, Senator Tim Scott's alma mater. Now, on Friday, he actually filed a statement of candidacy with the Federal Election Commission, cementing his plans to run for president, although people got a hint back in April when he actually formed a presidential exploratory committee. But very busy morning here already. Take a look at this. Standing room only as we prepare to cover this major announcement. Now, Senator Scott was actually in Greenville 10 days ago. We have some video of that. He was speaking at the 4th District Republican Club breakfast, and that's when he spoke about growing up in a low-income household, being raised by a single mom, and he also let the crowd know how important his Christian faith is to him. And he spoke about what he learned while on his Faith in America tour.
Every county in America is a border county. Closing the southern border is on the mind of Americans throughout this country. One of the reasons why is because most Americans recognize that border security is national security. Number two, the fentanyl crisis coming across our southern border with Mexican cartels' assistance is a tragedy that is preventable.
And Senator Scott will join an already crowded field of Republicans running for president. Among those who have already declared are former President Donald Trump and former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley. Now, the senator has picked up a couple of endorsements already, both from the state of South Dakota. One of those is Mike Rounds, a fellow senator who described him as the closest thing to Ronald Reagan there is right now. And also another endorsement from Senate Minority Whip John Thune. And both of those two supporters will be here for the announcement. And then after this announcement, Senator Scott will be pretty busy hitting the road. He plans to be in Iowa on Wednesday and New Hampshire on Thursday. So he is definitely making those cross-country rounds after today. Reporting live in North Charleston, Myra Ruiz, Fox Carolina News.